Welcome everyone to this live broadcast of Manufacturing Talk Radio. I'm Tim Grady and I'm here with Lou Weiss, who's the founder of Manufacturing Talk Radio and also the president of All Metals and Forge Group that makes open die forgings and seamless rolled rings for things like industrial gears you see in our background. If you'd like to find out more about those, go to steelforge.com. Joining us today is Anthony Nieves, who is the committee chair for the Institute for Supply Management's report on business for the services sector. As Anthony reminds us, it's the biggest sector of the economy. And Anthony, welcome to the show, and how's it doing?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
As always.
How's our services sector faring?
Well, when you look at the release that came out this morning, composite index came in at 55.3. It's down ever so slightly month over month, 0.6 percentage points from the 55.9 last month. And overall, this report has beat some of the expectations of the analysts out there. And looking at the four indexes that comprise this composite index, there were two indexes that declined that contributed to that slight pullback for the services sector. That being new orders, which came down 2 percentage points from the 57.6 to 55.6. And that tells us what's in the pipeline. And then employment contracted, came from 50.2 to 47.4. But I'd like to put a little put some explanation to that. The employment index, yes, we've had some layoffs out there in various companies in certain industries, but for the most part, what our respondents are telling us is that the restricted labor pool, the availability of suitable workers for the open positions and trying to backfill certain positions has caused them not to hire as much as they had month over month. And it's been an ongoing challenge even before we experienced the pandemic. But overall, our respondents are telling us that things still are okay, regardless of the pricing pressure, material shortages, and high inflation that we've been seeing in the months leading up to this release. And right now, it looks like we'll still be on that path of growth from what they're telling us.
Anthony, the services sector is another area where I see robotics, automation coming into play in those areas where the jobs are repetitive and can begin to replace or augment the labor pool. And I know we see that in manufacturing. Do you see much of it in the services sector?
Now, it's a great question, and I believe that in certain areas and certain tasks that have to be performed that can be replaced by technological advancements, that's just a natural evolution. The challenge remains that certain positions still require customer facing and high touch points of human beings. Yet we see in quick service restaurants, fast food specifically, that they've put kiosks in place to kind of offset some of the challenges that are associated with not just labor and the availability of labor, but also the cost of labor. So things that, trying to realize efficiencies and whatnot. But it's a little tougher in the services industry than it would be on the manufacturing side for sure. But definitely that evolution will take place. It has been taking place.
On the report, there are two numbers that are kind of contradicting each other. So I'd like you to explain it. You have the new orders, which dropped over 2 points, and then you have a backlog of orders that went up 8.5 points. How?
Why do you always have to give me the tough questions, Lou? No soft toss?
This is why you get points towards the yellow jacket.
There you go. Well, the new orders is what's in the pipeline. And so that cycle time could be, it's a lot shorter than what you see on the manufacturing side for sure. So it could be a few months to 6 months, but for the most part, it's usually less than a quarter on the services side, depending on whether it entails services rendered versus tangible goods versus capital expenditures. So that is why when we see business activity that jumped 1.6 percentage points, that's based on what happened in the preceding months. To your question on backlog, backlog is based on not just the activity that's happening now, but or the past month, but it could be leading up to that month, and it could be the trail end of that as well. And it has to do with logistical challenges more so than we've seen some of the demand come down a little bit, but this is more about logistical challenges. Even though things have become more efficient, we can see that on the supplier deliveries, which is also interrelated with the backlog as well as inventories, we can see that supplier deliveries slowed a little bit. They're slowing faster, so it was up 0.6 percentage points. And we can see inventory replenishment. And I can get more detail on that because there's a two-pronged perspective on that versus looking at inventories contracting at 47.5, which tells you they're not replacing or replenishing inventories as fast.
Got it. Got it.
Anthony, the general feeling that we're beginning to hear in the mainstream media is that first half of 2022 will be negative GDP. The first quarter was minus 1.6. They're not quite sure, and they haven't come out with the number for the second quarter, which could be anywhere from -1 to +1, but net negative for the first half of the year. How are your respondents feeling about the condition of the economy at the moment?
You know, and looking at it, and people are saying that with that said, what you just relayed to us, that information, that we could technically be in a recessionary period based on those numbers. But when you look at all the variables that, or the components of a recession, this would be really a unique situation because in history, we haven't had a recession where unemployment has been so low. You look at how low unemployment is, even though the jobs report came out, didn't add as many jobs in the past, and that's due more to the restricted labor pool I was talking about earlier. But the inverted yield curve has always been a precursor as to indicating whether or not we're going into a recession. If that happens, that'll definitely put us over the top, even though we don't have the high unemployment that's typically associated with a recession. But going back to your question and looking at it, that our respondents feel, and this came out of the semi-annual forecast as well as what they're telling us in the current report, is that things will continue to have this, we will still be on the path of incremental growth. Okay, we'll still continue to see growth. The challenge may be what headwinds do we encounter and what would happen going into 2023. The forecasts are and the projections are that we'll still see growth through the balance of the year. May not be the strong growth that we had seen in the first part of this year and the latter part of last year, which was, you know, really strong growth. If you look at the 12-month running average for the composite index of over 60, and even with the last 2 months being the lowest on that 12-month running measurement and average, it still is very high number. So we've always felt that wouldn't be sustainable over the long time, having growth at that level.
Do you think that the recession, the big one, is going to make it sometime around 23, mid 23?
It depends. I think that right now, what we're seeing is that we're almost talking ourselves into it. We always do. We have inflation, right? But inflation indications are that it's peaking, okay, or it has peaked and it's starting to come back a little bit, down a little bit. We're seeing it in certain materials costs have been reduced in the last month. We know that fuel prices have come off ever so slightly. I like to see how that transposes into our pricing index next month. The other big thing is consumer demand has diminished a bit, right? So there's not the strong demand. And we went into this inflationary period with demand pull inflation. So if the demand comes down, we start getting more availability on the supply side. These things will help us in getting, battling that inflation piece. And the Fed will back off a bit. that doesn't necessarily translate into how the psyche and mindset of the investors and the analysts are on the street, though. And that's the other big thing. But they're tied, but I also look at them as being mutually exclusive. So time will tell. I think to your question, Lou, that 2023, we could see that potential. The one thing is that if we do go into a recession, based on what we're looking at, all those components that we were talking about, that it won't be as strong or as deep a recession as we've had in the past, simply because people are working.
Right. Actually, I'm going to refer a comment over to Tim, because you made a statement, and I'm not 100% sure if it's correct, that the inflationary numbers, as I understand it, do not include fuel and food. Tim, I throw this in your lap.
That's correct. When they come out with inflation is at 8.4%, they are not including fuel and food for the obvious reason that if they did, it would be 12%. It would scare everybody. Terrible.
Yes, but I'm going to also give you another variable on that.
Okay.
Even though they don't factor in food and fuel, right? And we know that fuel costs are starting to come down a little bit. When you look at the deliverables, the output from whether it's manufacturing or on the services side, that fuel component works its way into total cost of ownership for products and services, right? It's just a matter of, and it does that because of, we have the distribution channel that both sectors rely on, overland trucking, right? That all factors into total cost of ownership, and transportation and warehousing, wholesale trade. Those industries specifically are the intermediaries for both sectors, but certainly more so on the services side when you're looking at disparate locations.
Yes, clearly. Price at the pump that's terrifying everybody. I think, yeah, Lou?
I was going to say personally, and you heard me say this the other day with Tim, as a businessman, not as a Joe Schmo in the street, as a businessman, I sort of like inflation. Prices go up, my prices go up. My prices go higher, the prices go higher. It's just,
great point, because, and this came out of comments from the respondents. They said they need to really analyze these cost increases across the board because they're not sure it's all just related to material cost and fuel cost, that it's pricing power based on demand, and that there's excuses used or reasons used for raising prices. The other thing that came out of the semi-annual report is that revenues are up and margins are up for companies. So it just speaks further to what you're saying.
you raise the price, you raise the price. That includes additional profit.
Well, there's no doubt that the major oil companies' margins are up. They're getting beat up about those margins at the moment from the administration, but we'll see where they invest their dollars with the United States trying to go electric vehicle for cars and trucks and boats and planes and trains.
Well, one thing that ticked me off was when the present administration decided to do away temporarily with the federal excise tax on gas, which is 18 cents. And then you go down to the pump and the price went down 2 cents. What happened to the other 16? It went into the pocket of the guy who owns the gas station.
Not necessarily.
He dropped 18 cents a gallon.
I think it's further up than just the guy that owns the gas station, right? He's probably the guy that's providing him with the fuel, right? That's where I think the money is. So the other thing is, think about this. If you're in the gas industry, fossil fuel industry, and everyone's pushing electric and, no more production of cars, and you're going to strike while a fire is hot, and you're going to say the heck with you. You're looking to pull the rug out from under me, so I might as well get mine while I can. And that's basically the mindset right now.
Yes, that's called grifting.
Well, certainly the 60% of gas station owners who are independent, and many of them own just one gas station, probably are thinking that way, Anthony, that they see an end in sight. It may be 5 years, it may be 50 years, but they're feeling uncomfortable based on the last 100 years of pumping gas into cars, and that's going to come to an end, or at least diminish dramatically as electric vehicles take hold.
Yeah, and I think that it's not just the, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the gas station operator, it's all that linkage. You know, everyone's looking at it the same way, and they're keeping margins according to what they need to make or what they think they might lose. And so there's a lot of factors being, that's factoring into their decision.
One thing that I don't understand right now about the fuel industry is, being that we have literally crucified Russia in every form that we can, why are we allowing Russian fuel to be sold to American car users in the United States?
Great question.
I'm not sure anybody's got a solid.
No one's going to answer that. I mean, what is it, Valero and I forgot the other one, but there are two.
Well, while you're on that topic, think about this. We're importing fuel, which cost us more than our own domestic production, and we shut down domestic production or limited it, I should say.
Right.
So,
Yeah, we're doing stupid things as some administrations will do.
Well, you may want to say, we don't want to use up our fuel first. Let's use up their fuel first. We'll pay a little more, but they'll run out before we will.
well, we actually just sold some of our reserves.
I know. I know.
It's crazy stuff. So, Anthony, we've talked a lot in the past about the transportation sector and how constrained it was, and there were 3 loads for every truck that was out there. Has that improved? Where does it stand today?
It's improved as far as, thinking to where the ports were a few months back to where they are today, right? They went from over 120 container ships in the queue off of just out of the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which handles over 30% of the container freight coming in overseas, right? So that has dropped down more into the 20 to 30 range of ships offshore. Still some capacity challenges with the offloading on the warehouse side, warehousemen, trucks, truck drivers, racks. That's still some capacity issues there, but it's definitely a lot better than it was even going back 4 to 6 months ago. So we still have some challenges. We still have some bottlenecks. We still have slow rail service. All these have contributed to why we have the backlog of orders index where it is, coupled with, we can't forget about some of the plant closures we had over in China based on COVID cases. They've reopened, they've closed, they've reopened. That's also put a kink in the supply chain as well.
Yes, closing again, Lou.
So what we're not hearing a whole lot about, because we have so many good things in the news like mass murders, war, so on and so forth, we're not hearing anything further, or at least I haven't heard anything further about the LA potential union strike that would really, really mess things up.
Yes, it would, for sure. I don't think there'll be much sympathy from the general public in that regard. So hopefully they can have a workaround.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. The longshoremen are not going to be in the strong position that they have been in some past instances, because we have gone through 2 years of unpleasantness, shall we say. So we'll see how that pans out, whether or not they decide to go on strike. Anthony, I'm always interested in how mining is doing because of the pressures on fossil fuels. Is mining holding its own? Is it improving, or are we going to see a drastic slide?
Well, right now they're toward the top, so that's a good thing for them, right? They were always the anchor in the past.
Right.
Yeah. So again, we had 18 industries on the composite reflecting growth, 15 industries in the business activity reflecting growth. So overall, where we had some pullback is on the retail side based on consumer demand that we've been talking about. So overall, the sector's doing quite well. How long it sustains that level, time will tell. But I think where we are right now, we're not going to see any strong decline in the next few months. Might see a little sideways movement, a little dip here and there, but anything major. Hopefully the employment number comes back next month. The summer is always tough, even though we have seasonal adjustments. The summer is where we're experiencing holidays and vacations and some closures. The other thing is we're seeing a shift in the consumer spend too. Not so much on tangible goods, but more so on experiences, vacation and travel. But now we see the challenges with the airlines, with flight cancellations and everything else. It's just, every time you think you're moving in a positive direction, there's another roadblock or impediment to be thrown in its way, right?
I was one lucky guy last week. I went to 4 cities in 3 days and 5 flights. I did not have one problem with any of my 5 flights. I think that if anyone would have bet on it, they would have lost.
Well, 2 reasons why. It was you, and were you wearing that yellow jacket?
No, I was actually wearing yellow Hawaiian.
There you go.
Yeah, but I was really surprised that I did not have any problems, no cancellations. Newark, of course, we got to Newark when I came home. We got there 20 minutes early. We sat on the tarmac for an hour because there was another plane in the spot because maybe they didn't know we were coming, who knows. And it took me 2.5 hours to get home from the airport, which normally only takes an hour. So it could have taken me as long to go from the airport to my home as it did from Florida to Newark.
Wow. Well, you're one of the positive experiences out there from what I've heard.
Yes, they're horror stories. Stories.
It's clearly a mess. The airlines didn't anticipate pilots retiring, apparently. And now they're catching on. Anthony, this number today, a good solid number, equates to what in GDP for the services sector?
On an annualized basis, 1.9%, which is, quite the fall off from what we were experiencing just a few months back when it was up in that 3.5 range with the higher composite index. But 1.9, anything positive, we'll take it. I think that, again, we don't know where these numbers are going to go in the next month or two, but I feel based on what the respondents are telling us and what the numbers are saying that, we should be north of the 50 baseline, and that's all we can hope for at this point.
So here's my opinion and forecast. I believe that, as you said in the beginning of the show about the summertime and vacations, and companies are now back to shutting down for 2 weeks for maintenance and so on and so forth. So I think, generally speaking, the summer, generally, you do lose business. There's less business to be done. But historically, in my world, September, October, November is the beginning of our marketing year. September, October, November always are terrific. So I see no reason why that won't be the case now, especially preceded by the summer.
Same holds true in services. We always see September as being that pivotal month to gear up for the holiday season. Retail
Correct.
starts having to, bring their stuff in, and others are getting ready. And, we usually see that all the way right up until Christmas. You have that little bit of lull from the tail end of December into the first half of January. And then there's usually a pickup the end of January. You don't see those numbers until February, maybe March. It's historical. The last 2 years kind of took that off the track.
They don't count.
Yeah.
The last 2 years don't count.
Yeah, it's been a mess. Well, Anthony, we appreciate you being with us on Manufacturing Talk Radio, and we appreciate the Institute for Supply Management allowing you to join us and share this important report with our listeners and our viewers. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate being on the show, and you all have a great day.
You as well. You take care now.
Thanks.
For those of you who are online watching this, whether it's on your iPhone or iPad or some other device, surf over to ismworld.org where you can find the report, or join us at jacketmediaco.com where you can find all of our podcasts, including Manufacturing Talk Radio. And thanks for being with us on this live broadcast.